So welcome to all. Many of you have been with us in the past, but we have a lot of new faces as well, and you're all very welcome. Describing risk, I'm going to assume, and looking at the attendance list, many of you are risk officers, so you would think and would expect me to think you know how to do this already, and I'm sure many of you do and have your own ideas. Thank you for joining this, but I have seen more bad descriptions than good descriptions, so I thought this would be a useful one to give people another perspective on it. Before I start into it, just a quick word to introduce us as a company. We see ourselves as risk and compliance professionals. We're members of various institutes and organisations like the Institute of Risk Management, Institute of Banking, Compliance Ireland. You get the idea. Through membership, we keep our skills sharp so that we're able to converse with our customers and provide solutions, that are appropriate. I chair the National Risk Management Committee on Risk Management Standards in the NSAI, and I represent Ireland at in the ISO TC262 Risk Management Committee. We supply a GRC solution to generally in the financial services sector. That's credit unions, insurance brokers, fund management, investment management, that whole sector, and then the not-for-profits, the charities, the sports, and the housing associations. That's generally our market sectors. That's us. I like a quote. Awareness breeds accountability. Now, I wrote this down many years ago, and yesterday I tried to find out who said it originally. I'm sure many people have said it, and I'm saying it, but I couldn't attribute it to any one person. If you are aware of the risk, you're more likely to manage it well. If senior management and the board are aware of a risk, they're more likely to take the accountability more seriously. They are accountable in any case, but awareness would certainly reinforce that accountability. Now, I see the elements of a risk when you're describing risk in these four boxes, if you wish, four items. The source of the risk, the cause, the risk event, and the consequences. And if I take, I'm going to go through a few examples with you, but one might be, let's say, cyber attack as the event. Well, what's the source? Well, it could be a cyber criminal, it could be a hostile nation state, it could be an aggressive competitor, or it could be a malicious employee. And the cause that led to the event, the vulnerability, if you wish, might be because you're not patching your servers. It might be that you haven't trained your staff and taught them not to click on dodgy links in emails. IT can't stop you clicking on links, well, it can, but then you probably couldn't do your work if you couldn't click on any link. So there are lots of things you can do, but this is not about a cyber risk. This is about describing the risk. The risk event is that's what it is. It's just an event, but it's not the full risk. The consequences are a key part of this. The consequences of a cyber attack might be loss of data. It might be unable to provide service for hours, days, weeks even. Reputation damage, loss of customers. This is important in the description of risk. If you just say fraud, and we look at fraud later, without saying what the consequences are, you've only half described the risk. No, fraud might be to handle and people understand the consequences. But when you're writing it down, a full description. So this will be the generic way. Something happening or not happening. Could be something that you were expecting to happen, but it didn't happen. And due to some cause or source, and you can combine those as well. But leading to what? Leading to the consequences. That will give me, if I'm not the person who's managing the risk, a better understanding certainly of what the implications are, what the real risk is. Let's have a look at a few. Now, I'm going to start with a not so good example that I've seen in the past. I've modified it slightly, but this is the essence of what I saw. It was lack of resources for management of communications during major emergency due to recent departure of staff, leading to inability to manage the communication of information to the public during an incident. Now, what caught my eye when I read this was the first three words, lack of resources. If you start any risk with the lack of resources, a senior person will say, this is just somebody driving an agenda to get more resources and will fail. And it's a poor description of risk, because resources is a constraint. You know what resources you have. There is no uncertainty about that. So I modified it slightly, and I put as the source. It might be budget constraints. You've got a hire freeze, so you can't hire people. And people who had the skills to handle communications have recently left. Therefore, you're left in the situation that you're, unable to manage the communication during a serious, a major incident. I put this into the 4 boxes. This is how you might create a sentence around the inability to manage communication of information during a major incident due to the lack of resources following departure of staff, leading to less effective incident management and reputational damage. Now, kind of saying the same thing, you might say, but the focus is on the inability to manage. Now, if somebody reading that might say, well, maybe we've got to cross-train people. That's the idea. You're focusing on what are the solutions, and the solutions aren't in getting more resources because there's a budget constraint. That's not going to happen. So you're forced as a professional manager to think other solutions, and that is appropriate. Let's look at a few examples. And I've tried, because we have a wide mix of people on the call today, I've picked a few from different sectors. So this is from the schools or multi-academy trust sector. And the risk shorthand might be a safeguarding incident or a major safeguarding incident. What is the source of that? Well, it could be radicalization or sexual exploitation or grooming of children. And the cause could be because, teachers and head teachers and principals are so busy that they fail to recognize the signs, or they weren't trained to recognize the signs, and then you have a major incident. Following that incident, you have the consequences, which is harm to pupils, which is one thing, but damage to the trust, to the school, and what that implies. Again, in one sentence, you'd say a major safeguarding incident occurring due to failure to recognize the signs, leading to harm to pupils and damage to the trust's reputation. Let's take another example, because I think the message will get through with several examples. We take a health and safety example, and often we hear people about slips, trips, and falls. Well, a slip, trip, and fall, it might be because and somebody's suffering a serious injury. There's a slip, trip, or fall where there's no injury, where somebody just tripped but didn't hurt themselves, just maybe their thigh. It's not what you're worried about. It's the one with the serious injury. So say that it's a trip and fall resulting in serious injury. And when you look back as to the source of that, and I've just put in one example here, it could be poor workmanship when the carpet was laid and you've got a bend or an edge of the carpet showing that somebody tripped over. Let's take another one. And let's take that data breach. The source might be the hostile nation state. The cause, an unpatched server, a vulnerability was published, and these happen, on a daily, weekly basis, and you have to react quickly and, patch that vulnerability in your server, or the bad guys will exploit it. Probably, they talk about day zero viruses. This is when the exploitation happens the day the vulnerability is published. But look, 95% of exploitation are on vulnerabilities that have been known for months. So you have no excuse, really. Or it could be an unwitting employee. Again, in a sentence, I would say a data breach due to a successful cyber attack that exploited an unpatched vulnerability on the mail server, leading to data corruption. Fines from the regulator because you've lost personal data possibly, or maybe the data was exposed and published on the dark web, and that can give rise to claims. So let's pick the fraud one, because I want to build on this fraud one. And this is, people talk about fraud, but in any organization, generally there are multiple fraud risks. And if I take just this one of fraud or result of a dishonest employee exploiting their permissions, they're a senior person, usually with authorizations that they need for their job, and they take advantage of that. And maybe they have a gambling habit, maybe they feel the company owes it them. The fraud triangle, I'm not going into that. But this is how you might describe it. if I show you this, we would capture those 4 pieces of information in our software like this: fraud, an employee due to your process. But on this, 2 years ago, we added a button called risks. Up at the top, you can see there, and we introduced the concept of what I would call a high-level risk or a roll-up risk. Because if you look at fraud and you look at all the sources of fraud, and it could be a dishonest employee, but it could also be a dishonest customer, or it could be a corrupt supplier. You probably have, at the operational level, 5, 10 fraud risks. And look across the board, you could have, for any of your operational risks, you could have multiple versions of it in the detail. The board don't want to see 10 fraud risks. The board wants to see 1. So think who the description of the risk is for. If it's for your manager, you might have the detail at the detail level. If it's for the board, then you want to roll up the risk. You want to gather the risks together. Show that you've considered all sources, all the vulnerabilities, all the paths, if you like, to this risk event, or the event of fraud. So this, I'm showing here, multiple sources, multiple causes, and multiple consequences. And this is, if you're reporting to the board and you've got 150 detailed risks, by the time you get to report to the board, that might be down to, 30, but you show the board in the top 10 of those 30. And if you wanted in one sentence, this is how I would write it: fraud as a result of dishonest employees, customers, suppliers, exploiting poor processes or permissions, leading to financial loss, reputation damage, and claims. That's me finished. That's the end of the webinar. I have time now. It's 3 minutes, I think, for questions, or 2 minutes. I would just say, remember that risks are not events. So if you're describing the event, describe the consequences at least. So thank you for listening. Short and sweet. I'm going to have a check now to see if there's any questions. No questions at the moment. We'll give it 30 seconds. We have still got just under a minute left in it. Oh, we have a question or 2. Slides. Yes, we will be providing the slides to you, and they will be sent on. Yeah, and also with the link to the recording. We have a YouTube channel, so the recording will be available as well if any of your colleagues want to see it. Okay, and getting some comments back. People liked the 15-minute snippets. That's the idea. Enjoy the rest of your lunch. Thank you for listening. We're back again on the 7th of September. And another interesting topic, at least I hope, is risk appetite. So 15 minutes on risk appetite. Steph, yeah, on my earlier examples and the badly fitting carpet, it was a very specific and very detailed risk. Of course, you probably look at slip, trips and falls and look at all of the sources and maybe have, the poor workmanship is just one source of it. It could be poor maintenance, it could be lots of things. But I do want to focus on individual risks, just more on the methodology. So, yeah, depending on who the audience is, you might have greater detail in there or less. So, okay, thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. Enjoy your lunch. Bye-bye.